Hello, starting a Facebook Live to see if this works. I'm seeing whether or not we should be doing these things more regularly as the campaign gets a little bit more complicated and more challenging moving forward. So first, I want to confirm if anyone actually is here and anyone is actually seeing what's happening here. So I'm going to check to see if I see any prompts come up.
Seeing whether or not we should be doing
some
these things more
feedback
regularly as the campaign here.
Okay, so I see that's working on Facebook Live. I want to see if I can simultaneously cast this onto YouTube. Okay, so YouTube will not simultaneously cast it at the same time. So today I shall run it on the Facebook, and then I'll see if I can simultaneously cast it on YouTube next time. Okay, thank you, Jessica. We have all been working very hard together, and I'm grateful that we are all here to win this fight together, because it's been incredibly difficult. I'll be putting this on YouTube later on. Okay, so I think we have a lot of new people here. My name is Dr. David Edward Uipoon, but please call me David. I'm the founder of the Faces of Advocacy. The Faces of Advocacy is a Canadian grassroots organization dedicated to the safe reunification of families during the COVID-19 pandemic. We were directly responsible for the extended family and compassionate exemptions into Canada during the COVID-19 related travel restrictions. So what that means is the IM-M006 and the compassionate exemptions coming to Canada were direct results of our advocacy. It's very important that I say this because as we move forward right now, I need everyone to remember that you have a voice and you have a strength and you have the ability to change the government's policies. I believe that we are in a big push. I believe that this is the moment where we can actually enact a lot of change. So I would like to review a few things that's been occurring, and I think we'll have to do these regularly, so it'd be helpful to find out what time is good for people, because we need to increase engagement and get more letters out. Yesterday, there was a report given by a group of physicians that was requested by the government to discuss a plan for reopening the border. Many of you guys have seen this, but I'll share it with you through Zoom. So let me just share the screen. And I would like to actually go through this bit by bit, because I think there's a lot of perhaps misunderstanding. And I think people just want some clarification on what this all means. So the document is entitled "The Priority Strategy," the Priority Strategies, and that's how I'll be referring to it moving forward. So can you guys confirm that you can see my screen? It says priority strategies to optimize testing and quarantine at Canada's borders. Okay, so I think it's confirming there. The basic idea is that this is what the government has asked to be produced by a number of experts on the border and, experts on COVID, on what to do with the border. So this is the list of people. Some of you may know Irfan Dalla. He's been in the news a lot. There are names like David Naylor, big public health person, Isaac Bogoch, who's an ID specialist in Toronto. I believe he was in the same hospital that I trained at. Dr. Yu is the president of Alberta Health Services, and actually was previously a mentor of mine when I went to medical school. So the reason why I bring this up is this is a very legitimate source. These are true experts when it comes to medicine and infectious diseases. So some people might say, another panel of experts. We don't trust those guys. I personally trust these guys. I believe you should as well. And they were selected by the government. They are an independent panel to look into how COVID-19 will affect the border and what the border can do in response to COVID-19. This is very important because as of today, Dr. Tam and Minister Haidu, as well as a statement from FAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, have effectively said that they are not acting on any of the recommendations. Now, Minister Haidu has said that their recommendations will be brought forth with the provinces next week. And so there is probably some discussion. I have personally contacted Christia Freelance People. She's my MP, and as you know, you know her as the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister. The response from Freelance People is that there are many people dealing with this issue. And because there are so many pieces to deal with, it might take some time. Now, I do not think we have time to waste. We've been at this for at least a year, some months. It's been very difficult on a lot of us. And that's why we need to get ourselves, our members, our friends and family writing advocacy letters. We need to target the province. We need to target the federal level. We need to target our own MPs, because this is something we really need to change. These changes at the border will be enacted by the federal level. That means a member of parliament, as well as the Trudeau government. However, as discussed earlier, Minister Haidu, as well as the federal government, will be consulting the provinces, in particular, I believe, Ontario and Quebec. So that's why we need to approach both our premier and our MPPs, our members, or our provincial members, as well as our federal members. If you are able to get one other person to send our advocacy letter, that would really help, because we need to expand far beyond. A lot of us have been reunited, but I think that we all need to work on this together. So let's go through what the recommendations have been. In particular, let's look at the word hotel quarantine. There is a line here that essentially says that the hotel quarantines should be discontinued. And this is really the kind of thing that we need to focus on. The current requirement for all air travelers to quarantine in government authorized accommodations should be discontinued. So you might know them as GAA, which are government authorized accommodations. You might know them as the hotel quarantine. Please don't use other words to describe them. If you want to use the medical term, it would be the MIQs, mandatory isolation and quarantine facility. So this is a straight up recommendation from this panel of experts. Because it's right here, it's from the people that the government trust, we need to hit this hard. So while the recommendations are there, we have to convince the government to actually act on them. That's one part of our advocacy letter. The evidence is here, follow the science, get this done. The second bit actually talks about what specifically will happen to people who are partially vaccinated or fully vaccinated. So they're the partially vaccinated who receive the first dose of a 2-dose series. And there's also a timing thing as well. And then the fully vaccinated people who have had both vaccines and then 14 days past the final dose. The reason why we bring it up is because how every person is vaccinated will change how they quarantine, or if they quarantine, when approaching the border. So I would like to give a shout out to our newest team member, Sydney. I have yet to give her an official title, so I'll just call her our Chief Graphic Design Officer right now. Let me know if you if you like that title, Sydney. But she made a fantastic graphic which summarizes everything that we're discussing here. So let me just pull it up. So this is essentially lifted from the report, but this is kind of made in a little bit easier to understand. So let's say you're fully vaccinated and non-exempt. So that's essentially us, those with extended family members in Canada coming into Canada. We have our full vaccination, but we are not considered exempt. So we aren't a government official, we aren't a medical personnel, we aren't a truck driver. Okay, so there is some testing that can be done once we arrive. However, if it is negative, we are not doing any sort of quarantine stay. If you're partially vaccinated and you're non-exempt, you're doing a pre-departure test upon arrival, and then you're doing quarantine. I'm sorry, I might have misspoke here. Fully vaccinated, non-exempt. I think quarantine is not even part of their flowchart. When we're dealing with unvaccinated non-exempt, that's what we currently have for most people. They're coming in, they have to do a pre-departure test, and on arrival, a day 7 test. Now, the government, this evidence-based report is saying that if you are non-vaccinated, you will still be subject to quarantine, but your quarantine will not necessarily be in a hotel. And this is something that the Faces of Advocacy has been pressing for quite some time. So the hotel quarantine stay is completely off, which is something that we've been fighting for quite some time. Now, the question is, how do we actually get the government to act on this? So for the government to change, we believe that the hesitancy has been entirely based on politics and not necessarily science, because while the government has stated many times that they want to follow the science and use evidence-based to move forward, the actions have not been congruent with that. I'll give you an example. The hotel quarantine system as it stands has been shown to be quite flawed. For one, it's only 3 days long. For two, you test out of it on day one. That means they actually trust you if you have a negative result to actually go home and quarantine on your own. In my early discussions when the hotel quarantine came up with the government officials, it was based entirely as a deterrent for people to go traveling. I understand that the public thinks that we're traveling to go partying in Mexico or go to Dominican Republic for an all-inclusive, but that simply hasn't been the case. Because though that is the impression, and the government officials have told me that they get many emails regarding that, we need to supersede the number of emails coming in and discussing that by showing that this is an important thing. We need to have reunification for families. We need our allies in the business industry, the airline industry to come along with us too. Because now that we have evidence-based scientific reports by trusted officials the government personally asked to do this, we now have specifically a very clear mission: convince the government to adopt these recommendations. So our current motto is hope for a post-COVID world, and that's exactly what we're focusing on. The advocacy letter, the one-click method, or you can do copy and paste, is meant to be sent out to politicians to let them know that there is a high level of interest in voting Canadians to allow mobility through the border for both unvaccinated and vaccinated people, following the recommendations set out in this priority strategy. We aren't making things up. We aren't saying, oh, another country suggests this. No, we're following exactly what Canadians want and what Canadian scientists have put forward. This is our clearest way to get this done, and that's why the advocacy letter is very important. I realize many of you watching right now are probably very active, and I'm very grateful for that, but we have a huge number of people who are not sending out advocacy letters. We try to make it as easy as possible by having a one-click method, and we're having more and more people come in as people get tired of the hotel quarantine, but we really could use the help. So I'm asking anyone watching to please ask at least one more person to send the advocacy letter. Make sure to CC your member of parliament and your MPP. Let me just quickly go through the chat here to see if there are any questions coming up here. Thank you to all of you for working together. Thank you, Cyril, for sending a letter. Will the IMM006 still be needed once the new proposal? So in regards to the IMM006, we've had a number of issues. I hear you. If you have further issues where you're stalled past the 14 business days, email me at poon@facesofadvocacy.com because what we've been doing has been tracking the number of late authorizations and showing them to the IRCC to get them processed. So we don't know if the IMM006 will be needed in the future, but I can say it's certainly needed now and it needs to work better. Because the government is going to take a long time, it appears going to take a long time unless we have further political will. What we're approaching to do as a team is asking the government to at least allow families to be first through the door when it comes to the discontinuation of the hotel quarantine, as well as the vaccination status entry requirements. Now, this is something that I have brought up with the government much early on, like back in February. And I was simply told at the time that because of rising caseloads, there's no appetite for this from the Canadian people. Whether or not that's because we didn't send enough advocacy letters or maybe because the other guys just sent more advocacy letters, I'm not too sure. But we're in a different place now. We have a lot more vaccinations and we have this backing of the report that was released yesterday. Okay. Thank you, Sydney, for putting the report up. If someone could put the advocacy letter into the chat, that'd be helpful. Terms like hotel imprisonments and such, the reason why I'm hesitant to use them is because they might compare these hotels, which are at least somewhat sanitary, to horrific human injustices that have happened over the course of history. And so terms like camp, imprisonment, jails, these are not the terms that I want to use when we're describing the mandatory isolation and quarantine facilities. We'll love the one-click method. So I saw the ad initiative. Yes, I know that there's an ad initiative and they've done a good job. The reason why we were not going in that direction with the ad is we felt that we prefer to build things in-house for Faces of Advocacy. In addition, we do our best to remain as nonpartisan as possible. And I believe the more American style bent of a combative political ad was not quite congruent with how we usually do things at Faces of Advocacy. However, if John Adams reaches out to me and we want to work on something together, I think it was very effective. It got a lot of news coverage, and I think it certainly is waking people up to the challenges that we have. So can non-Canadians send the advocacy letter? The non-Canadians can send them, but make sure to have the postal code of wherever the Canadian is from because it shows the voting. I'm sorry, Janine, that you had the worst experience. I hope the Faces of Advocacy offer you some help. Is it possible to extend an authorization? People have to reapply for the authorization. I understand some of you are having letters come back that say your authorization is good for 6 months, and then partway through the letter it says only good for 3 months, and it says only one-time entry and immediate family. It looks like we had a report today that one of the people who got sent an erroneous letter was later sent a correct letter. I have personally contacted the IRCC and explained to them that people are getting 6, 3 months, one entry. They're trying to clear it up, but it's supposed to be 6 month multiple entries. And to renew it, you have to reapply for it. Reapply through the web form. We understand that a number of you have had issues with the web form. I brought it up specifically. If you are an IRCC missing, which refers to the people who are not being processed in a timely fashion, please contact me at Faces of Advocacy, and I'll put your file along. When you email me, please make sure to have your contact information and all screenshots of the relevant documents. Okay, I've explained to email me at facesofadvocacy.com if there's an issue. Our Chief Data Officer, Nathalie Picard, is also tracking the IRCC missing. We are seeing some effect with tracking this. I'm not too sure if it's an excellent presentation, but I'm grateful you guys are listening. Temporary residence. We have fought for temporary residence since day one. I've been told multiple times it's a losing battle, and up until the hotel quarantine, temporary residence was actually our focus. It was our main focus after our initial exemptions. In our language, we refer to Canadians and all Canadians and residents. So that means permanent and temporary residents. When I brought it up with the IRCC, they say temporary residents do have a pathway, and it's true. There is a pathway for temporary residents to have family reunification. It's more difficult. However, we've had a number of people actually get through as temporary residents. Right in the daily event and question threads on Faces of Advocacy about your situation as a temporary resident, and someone will be able to help you. There is a pathway through it. It's just not nearly as easy, and it's more challenging. And I'm sorry, we have been unable to deliver a better win for temporary residents. My suspicion is temporary residents can't vote, and that's why there's a challenge there. We are not expected to provide extra proof when you apply for the IMM006E. You are supposed to just put the Canadian's proof of citizenship, proof of being Canadian, so which would be their passport, for example, as well as the signed IMM006. And once you submit that, you should be able to get your authorization. So, it actually specifically says don't submit pictures. Someone in the chat named Kathu is asking for help. If someone can help Kathu, please. Family class sponsorships for PR. I mean, if you actually go into our Faces of Advocacy group and type in the word mandamus, we actually did, I feel, a large thing with the family sponsorship classes. With our chief data officer, Nathalie, was able to liaise with a prominent Toronto lawyer. And from my understanding, the mandamus applications we did for those families have all been processed. That doesn't mean approved, but they were processed when they were over that 1 year mark. So if you search in our Facebook group the word mandamus, you'll find some help there. Someone is asking what is the IMM 006, and I asked someone in the chat please to help that person. Within the Faces of Advocacy group, we have spent a lot of time with our admin team to curate the articles and give very specific help. So I beg of you, if you have a question, please use the search function first. The reason that we work so hard is to make sure that is a high yield area for help. The authorization for the IM 006 is valid for 6 months. It is. It just is. It says so. And then the question comes, do you think the recommendations that were sent out will come into effect? And that's where we need to use the advocacy letters. So I'll be doing these things more regularly just to talk about what we're doing moving forward. But we need to actually get these letters out. Everyone has a voice. And there are, I think, a lot of people willing to complain on the internet, but I'm unsure whether or not those people are actually willing to do some work to make a change. The Faces of Advocacy specifically declines most posts because it's not a place to vent. It's not a place to express your disappointment. It's a place to actually do something to change. Advocacy is work, but it is effective. And that's what the Faces of Advocacy are trying to do. So if we are going to bring about hope for a post-COVID world, we need to put in the work. In this case, send out your advocacy letters. If I'm sure many of you already have. In the automatic version, we did not include your personal MP because we have no idea what your personal MP is. So send it to your personal MP and send it to your local MPP, so your provincial representative. And you can also CC your premier. We're going to try to add premiers on this soon. But your personal MPP and your personal MP, please resend the letter. And then if you can commit to just getting one other person to send the email, that would really help us as well. We're doing our best to bring in as much recruitment as possible and to bring forward the strategy, but we could use some help. We have a wonderful team doing all this work, and we're very, very grateful for this. Okay, so Caitlin, thank you for asking. I mean, I myself have an international partner. Half our team have international partners that are not US. So we refer, Face of Advocacy is about the borders. It doesn't just refer to the American border. So we will not forget about other borders. Are we waiting on word from the UK and EU governments for vaccine passports? So we're not using the term vaccine passports. I refer to it specifically as mobility, extra mobility for those with vaccination status. And we are not just pushing for the US. I mean, there are 3 orders in council. There are 3 laws that make the border restrictions. One is for the international non-US border, one is for the US border, and one is for the actual 14-day quarantine. We have always been fighting for them. Again, my partner, AJ, is from Ireland. Like, we will not forget the others. In addition, the whole fight about the hotels and our charter challenge and this current method to stop the hotel quarantine, it doesn't affect a lot of US people. US people are driving in, not using the hotels to begin with. So hotels are very much a push for the international non-US couples. So we will not forget that. If you see someone post that, please just gently remind them that I myself have an international partner and about half our team does as well. So to piggyback off of what Gracie is saying in the chat, Justin Trudeau has mentioned that there can be more talk about the border reopening at 75% vaccination. So some people have asked, how do we actually tell Public Health Agency of Canada that someone like myself who got my vaccination in New York when I was studying there because I was living there, I didn't go fly over, but how do people who've got their vaccinations elsewhere actually report? And I contacted my contact at Health Canada, and they don't know yet. So they're working on that. In addition, how do kids, so people less than 18 and over 12, how are they counted? And there's no answer yet, but we're working on highlighting that. Thank you for doing all this. There is a repeat question. When the border reopens, will there still be a requirement for the IMM 006? I can't imagine there would be, because if the border is open, then we have no more need to actually apply for our extended family members to come in. There's Palmini Madeline, who actually called Public Health Agency of Canada and told them their vaccination info. That's wonderful. This has not been communicated to me, and I don't think it's been communicated widespread. Okay, so that is today's. I'm going to be just showing you briefly some of the work that we've been doing. I'd like to highlight our new logo that my partner AJ put together. Our logo right now is essentially to highlight our current motto, hope for a post-COVID world. So we are subtly expanding beyond just our family mandate. And that's why people who are struggling in their business, people who work in the aviation industries, people who've flown for other reasons, and we're stuck in a hotel quarantine, we want all of them writing advocacy letters, because I think this is the next frontier of where we really need to push. So I realize you're all tired. I am as well, the team is as well, but we need to press forward in order to enact the change. I strongly believe that we are in a very good position to actually change something. I believe if we do not push, we will be delayed for weeks, possibly months, on any sort of action. In terms of the hotel quarantine, back in March of 2021, we wrote an extensive report on the state of the hotel quarantine, and we'll ultimately share it on one of these days here. But trying to see if actually it's showing up here or not. Okay, so you guys hopefully see this report here. And this was a fantastic piece done by members of our team, our chief triage officer, our director of public relations. This is the kind of work that the Face of Advocacy is continually doing, and we are pushing the best we can. If you'd like to donate, you don't have to, but we're at buymeacoffee.com/faces of advocacy, buymeacoffee.com/faces of advocacy. And this kind of thing we were asked to produce for public safety back in March because people had questions about the hotel quarantine. We polled our members, we learned about the gender disparities, we discussed the financial hardships, we found out how many of the couples had kids who were hurt by the hotel quarantines, we did another mental health index, we chronicled a lot of the problems that the hotel quarantine had. And this kind of thing is what we need to do to push the government to change. But the government won't know to change unless we tell them as voting Canadians that we want them to change. And this is the reason why the advocacy letter is the singular most important thing you can do. I get it, it's easier to tweet, I get it, it's easier to just repost and blog, but we need to actually do something to get the change happening, and that starts with the advocacy letters. I see that John McCall is in the chat. His family is a story that we talk about regularly, but every briefing we send to the government, we have this little section, it's called For Donna. Donna McCall is an American woman who married is a Canadian woman who married an American man. She was a nurse. She has wonderful American children, and she died last year without saying goodbye to her children in person. They had to say goodbye in FaceTime, and John McCall famously says that FaceTime is not the same. We advocate in honor of her because this should have never happened. I'm currently in talks with someone in Parliament about establishing Donna's rule, which would be that in times of pandemic or conflict, so that means war or any other issues, family reunification should be of the utmost priority. And I have no idea if it's going to happen, but it's something that I believe that we have to keep pushing for. Even if you're reunited, We don't want to have another situation like what the McCall family was put through. So, like Laura says in the chat, let's push. So I don't know when we'll do another one tomorrow, but we'll do one sometime tomorrow. There were about 50 of you on the live today. Thank you for being here. If you have a moment, go into the Faces of Advocacy group or any other border couple group or any other group, with people affected by the hotel quarantine and vaccination issues. Just message under one person, comment under one thing. Hey, here's an advocacy letter to make things change. That would be really helpful. That would be an extra 50 letters sent out tonight. And we're going to be doing this. We're probably going to be doing this every single day, because if we wait, we run the risk of another horrific situation like what happened with the McCall family, and the government will delay in moving on this. Anyway, let me just do one last check here. I'm sorry, June, what happened to your father? Okay. Thanks, John. Have a wonderful day, guys. Please comment on someone's post and show them the advocacy letter. Tell them to come to the Face of Advocacy, get something done, because we need to enact the change. See you.